you scared? Hi, everybody. That is a piece composed by Michael Roth, who is actually with us this evening. Yes, Michael Roth. For Des's third production of Macbeth at the Stratford Festival. Those of you who have been here a couple of times, you're going to hear some same information. And those of you who have not been here yet, I am here to introduce the one and only Des McAnuff. Des is our Joan and Irwin Jacobs Distinguished Professor of Practice at the UC San Diego Department of Theater and Dance. And we are very, very proud to have him. Applause, applause, applause. Yes. As many of you know, Des is the founding artistic director of the La Jolla Playhouse, and also the artistic director of the Stratford Festival, and a two-time Tony Award-winning director. You will know him for his work on, Jersey Boys, Tommy, Johnny and June, countless musicals, but you may not know, unless you were here back in the day when I was here, that Des is one of the foremost directors of Shakespeare. While here at the La Jolla Playhouse, I had the great pleasure of seeing Des's Twelfth Night and also his Macbeth. And then at the Stratford Festival, of course, he directed The Tempest with Christopher Plummer and many other Shakespeare, I hate to call them just plays, Shakespeare events. And so it is, I don't want to groan on too long this time, except to say that Des was a fantastic mentor to me. I'm thrilled that he's here with us as part of the department because he will be a fantastic mentor to you. And without further ado, I will introduce Des McAnuff to the stage.
I just want to say before I start this thing, well, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And there is a live feed, and so I appreciate that some people have tuned into it as well. I just want to say, if you don't know the play very well, or you feel like you may not know it very well, I go into a little bit of detail, of course, a fair bit of detail. I don't want you to worry about that. I think just kind of let it wash over you, and then perhaps at the end you will, be inspired to look into the play. Obviously, it's best to read it, but there are, a number of good film versions and a couple of television versions. So tuning into it that way will work too, and hopefully. I hope this is, a bit of a guide, and I hope I give you some insights into the play. So that's it. Let me begin by saying I am not a scholar of dramatic literature. I am a theater artist. As such, I'm a practitioner, and my insights on Macbeth come mainly from my work in production, with the odd teaching assignment tossed in as a kind of garnish. When it comes to acquiring knowledge and technique, I'm afraid I must confess to being somewhat of a scrounger, or better still, a hunter-gatherer. If I find a tasty nut, I don't always remember where I've discovered that particular tidbit. I've had many influencers and teachers, all of the actors and artists that I've worked with during the 3 times I've directed the play, including and especially my longtime dramaturg and collaborator Robert Blacker, as well as David Prosser of the Stratford Festival, and my 3 Macbeths, Nicholas Pennell, John Vickery, and Colm Feore, all of whom gave me delicious insights. Anyway, today it's all for you, unoriginal, pilfered, or invented. I should also credit my mentor, Michael Langham, who was an RAF pilot and was a prisoner of war in a Nazi camp for 5 years. And that's where he learned to direct plays. He went on to be Tyrone Guthrie's protege. He was artistic director of the Stratford Festival and the kind of, I suppose, theatrical architect of that institution. He was also here at the Playhouse. He never presided over a season, but he was here for several years and paved the way for the Playhouse. He went on to become artistic director of the Guthrie Theater, and he was the head of the Juilliard School as well. His conceit was that Shakespeare's plays are the greatest record of human thought in the history of existence. The words can mean many things. They can be many things. Verse or prose or lyrics for songs or pure rhetoric or incantation. In Macbeth, they are actual image chains. They can have a multitude of meanings, but it's all living thought. The process of discovery, not just dialogue, not just speech, but thought. Why Macbeth? I have reverently followed the play around for many years, stumbling through its maze of dread and darkness and wonder. It has inadvertently served as a measuring stick for where I find myself on life's journey, and so I'm compelled to inflict it upon you. While the play is not absolutely perfect, it's as close as I want to come. It's intimidating enough. As a little kid in the 60s, I read the classic comic book, Macbeth, published in 1955, which included the full text of the play with magnificent cartoon illustrations, and I was hooked. I've never really gotten away from the Scottish play. I must warn you, when you let Macbeth into your life, it will taint your unconscious and send horrifying pictures cascading between the cracks in your nightmares. As Macbeth himself comments, these terrible dreams that shake us nightly. So have fun. When I read this for the cat, it was just under an hour. So rest assured. Shakespeare's main source for the play was Raphael Holinshed's Chronicles, Volume 5, Scotland, and his account of the reigns of King Duncan and Macbeth. James I of England was formerly James VI of Scotland, and he had only been on the English throne for 3 years. He had surrounded himself with many of his countrymen, so Windsor was teeming with jocks, as the English call Scots, and there was plenty of brogue chatter. So it's certain that oral history provided deep background for the play, as is often the case with theater works. The monarchy was a little uneasy as the late Queen, Elizabeth Tudor, had chopped off the head of Mary, Queen of Scots, who happened to be the king's close relative. She was, in fact, his mother. Holinshed based his chronicles on the Scotorum Historiae by Hector Boece, written in 1527 during the reign of Scotland's James III, and it functions as much as political propaganda as historical record. It is a work that treats fact and fiction with equal indifference, and its relationship to accuracy is, to put it charitably, flexible. The historical Macbeth bore little resemblance to Shakespeare's creation. He had no fiendish queen, no Banquo, no Macduff. Duncan was not the venerable saintly sovereign of the play, but a contemporary of Macbeth's, arguably his junior, who perished not by murder, but in battle. Shakespeare's play is intended for his own time as a political history that caters to the beliefs of James I of England and reinforces, through sheer invention, his right to rule the land. This is common and happens in all countries to some extent. I was in the Soviet Union during the 80s, during the time of perestroika under Gorbachev and Yakovlev, and got to see a play that actually featured Leon Trotsky at the Vakhtanga Theater with a great Russian director and actor Mikhail Ulyanov. Now, Trotsky had not been portrayed, he'd hardly been portrayed at all for decades, and he certainly had not been portrayed in a positive light. Now, the Soviets weren't terribly interested in Trotsky. What they were interested in was contemporary Soviet policy, and that's the reason that he was put in the play. Macbeth was likely written in 1606, right after King Lear. Both works were created in the shadow of and were significantly galvanized by the Gunpowder Plot, in which a small cadre of cranky, radicalized Catholics attempted to blow up Parliament in November of 1605, their ambition being to annihilate the Protestant king and his legislators in a single stroke and seize control of the state. The enterprise collapsed, and the conspirators were subjected to the full system of Jacobean judicial punishment. They were gruesomely hanged, drawn, and quartered. By now, someone out there is wondering if Shakespeare actually wrote the play, or was his play merely a pseudonym for, let's say, Francis Bacon or Christopher Marlowe, or more likely, Edward de Vere, the Earl of Oxford. That particular conspiracy theory started with a high school teacher conveniently named Thomas Looney, which he insisted was pronounced Loney, and it's managed to convince a number of otherwise reputable people of its veracity. Unfortunately for them, the Earl died in 1604, 12 years before Shakespeare. So unless he managed to reach out of the grave to hold the quill, a neat trick indeed, we have to accept that Macbeth wasn't penned by a nobleman or a graduate of Oxford or Cambridge, but rather a lower middle class glover's son from Stratford upon Avon. Many of Shakespeare's plays first appear in quartos, cheap manuscripts, the equivalent of a dime store paperback. But Macbeth makes its debut in print for the first time in the classier folio of 1623, edited by Shakespeare's colleagues in his joint stock company, The King's Men, John Hemmings and Henry Condell. Macbeth is Shakespeare's fourth shortest play, weighing in at 17,121 words. But it was probably even shorter than that. A rocket ride by Jacobean standards, with a couple of random passages stuffed in later. In other words, it's a good guess to assume that Thomas Middleton added the character of Hecate, Queen of the Witches, to the text sometime after the initial command performance in 1606 at Hampton Court. The play is chronicled as having been performed at the Globe, the outdoor theater of the King's Men, in 1611, and more likely at the Blackfriars, the company's fancy new indoor theater, in 1613, during the time of the great designer Inigo Jones. Middleton was known for featuring elaborate masks or spectacles in his own plays. He and Shakespeare likely co-wrote Timon of Athens in 1605, and so it wouldn't be surprising, given that he was around, for him to polish the text for a subsequent production of Macbeth to freshen it up. Presumably, Shakespeare's three wayward sisters went over big with the rubes and the ruffians, and it didn't hurt to pander to the king, who had written a piece himself called Demonology, and believed a spell had been cast upon him, causing him to almost drown in a shipwreck. It's also suspicious that Middleton repeated a Hecate song verbatim that appears in Macbeth in his own play The Witch, that was published following Shakespeare's death in 1616. So no Hecate, no Earl of Oxford. When you're dealing with any of Shakespeare's history, you have not just two historical periods to refer to, but three. Macbeth reigned from 1040 to 1057, strangely just 10 years before the Norman invasion, the main event that shapes our understanding of English history. So while Mackers was losing his head up north, down in Hastings, William the Conqueror and Harold, Edward the Confessor's son, were getting ready to duke it out to establish a control of England that would turn out to last for 3 centuries. That's our historical time frame. Our second temporal frame is Shakespeare's own lifetime, 1564 to 1616, and more precisely, the charged Jacobean era in which a Scottish king sat on the English throne while Protestant and Catholic hostilities festered with renewed intensity. Finally, and most importantly, there is the here and now, because at the end of the day, what we're all really interested in are our own lives and times. How does the play apply to now, to where we are going? Shakespeare had one contemporary who was particularly influential. The two of them were kind of like Taylor and Beyonce. It's hard to think of one without the other. While Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus was written well over a decade before the Scottish play, Marlowe having been murdered in 1593, it was still remarkably popular, like Macbeth, and it charted a course through ferocious darkness involving the supernatural. It had a great influence on Macbeth. When Marlowe was alive, he and Shakespeare went back and forth like two pop stars on the Billboard charts. Marlowe's two parts of Tamburlaine inspired Shakespeare's bloody revenge tragedy, Titus Andronicus. Richard II sparked the flames for Marlowe's Edward II, and Marlowe's Jew of Malta undoubtedly led to Shakespeare's Merchant in Venice. This do-si-do had everything to do not just with competition, but fashion and popularity. These poets were dependent on box office success. They were commercial playwrights. The first really big hit of Elizabethan times was Thomas Kyd's The Spanish Tragedy, and Marlowe and Shakespeare practically stumbled over each other trying to keep up with it. The revenge play was Elizabethan action-adventure in pumpkin pants. If there was a difference between Kit and Will, it was that Marlowe tended to write in one voice. He was a monologist, where Shakespeare created a whole host of viewpoints, often bearing his own in a matrix of individual voices. Of course, Marlowe died at 29, so who knows how he would have evolved, or just as importantly, what impact he would have had on the Bard's canon had he lived. The ideas of Macbeth, on the other hand, seem to have much more to do with current affairs in 1606 than they do with Marlowe's Dr. Faustus. Guy Fawkes haunts the story, as does the gunpowder plot's true mastermind, Robert Catesby, after whom the firework holiday should really be named. But of course, poor Guy was caught holding the fuse, so he lives on like Lee Harvey Oswald. In Macbeth, the regicide of Duncan unleashes what can only be described as a metaphysical rebellion of nature. For years, I was told that a hurricane struck London in 1606, inspiring the tempest imagery of King Lear and the perpetual darkness in Macbeth. In fact, there was no hurricane, merely heavy rain that soaked the conspirators' gunpowder and forced them to spread it out to dry, the very act that precipitated their discovery. There was no tempest, but the weather did turn freakishly cold from December of 1605 through the winter of 1606 and into December and January of 1607. Temperatures were sub-zero. The River Thames froze over for months, so people could actually skate on it. Undoubtedly, it stoked superstition about God's incensed reaction to the gunpowder plot. Hence the theme in Macbeth, and for that matter, King Lear, the rebellion of nature. Consider this exchange between Ross and the old man, one of the play's most colorful passages of nature turned against itself. Act 2, Scene 4, Ross and the old man. The old man. On Tuesday last, a falcon, towering in her pride of place, was by a mousing owl hawked at and killed, Ross. And Duncan's horses, a thing most strange and certain, beauteous and swift, the minions of their race, turned wild in nature, broke their stalls, flung out, contending against obedience, as they would make war with mankind, old man. 'Tis said they ate each other. The English war between the Catholics and the Protestants riddles Shakespeare's play and its stuff and substance. In the early 17th century in England, there was what was known as the doctrine of equivocation, where in order to protect himself, a priest could speak in half-truths, thereby remaining safely sequestered in secrecy. The text of Macbeth is filled with word games that reflect this doctrine. Here's an example from The Weird Sisters. Act 1, Scene 3, the three sisters. First sister, hail. Second sister, hail. Third sister, hail. First sister, lesser than Macbeth and greater. Second sister, not so happy, yet much happier. Third sister, thou shalt get kings, though thou be none. So all hail Macbeth and Banquo. First sister, Banquo and Macbeth, all hail. One might compare the rhetorical mode here to that of any professional practitioner of strategic vagaries. They sound like used car salesmen or real estate agents or theatrical directors or drama critics. In Macbeth, is Macbeth a history or a tragedy? Like his earlier play, Richard II, it's emphatically both. Shakespeare was an innovator and didn't simply obediently adhere to the rules of a genre. The line of kings in the cauldron scene traces James I's lineage back to his ancestor Banquo. And yet there's no doubt that our king is a tragic hero. King Lear is mythological. Macbeth is British history. They're both highly evolved tragedies. Let's look to the big picture, the overview. The play is bookended by two huge battles. Generals Macbeth and Banquo lead Duncan's troops to fight off a Viking invasion under Sweno. And simultaneously, an internal rebellion is being led by the Thane of Cawdor. And then at the end of the play, there is the siege of Dunsinane, where Malcolm leads the Scots and the English under Seward coming up from the north to reclaim Scotland. In between, the story is essentially a domestic tragedy about a couple that seems strikingly middle class. It's like the 1946 American film The Postman Always Rings Twice, where a couple conspires to murder, but as the title implies, their fate ultimately overwhelms them. As the play develops, Macbeth gradually shrinks in size, so by the fifth act, Scotland itself becomes the main character. Macbeth dwindles peaks and pines. Light comes up from the south by way of Burnham Wood, bringing lush green and life to the desolate, scorched landscape. Macbeth is described as a dwarfish thief with his oversized garment hanging off of him as the usurper is finally overrun. And while the text is extremely terse, the play is richly woven in a tapestry of image chains. Shakespeare does with words what Hitchcock does with visuals. Think of the clocks in Rear Window. Time is Hitchcock's central image chain in that film. Shakespeare takes full advantage of the concept of time in his play as well. We measure time by sunrise and sunset, but the Scottish couple murders time and brings eternal night to Scotland. Without the rhythms of the rising and falling sun, they are lost in perpetual darkness. Shakespeare's plays often have a very carefully worked out timeline. All you have to do to decipher it is to dig into the text. Romeo and Juliet takes place over 5 scorchingly hot days in the summer, where none of the characters ever sleep. Then there's As You Like It, which unfolds across 7 days, the 7 days of creation, the 7 ages of man as cataloged by Jaques, the 7 quarrels, the 7 days of the week. Macbeth takes place in no time, in an endless nightmare, a universal void suspended in the empty eye of the vortex. I pride myself with a little pretension on being a bit of a manipulator of the smooth theatrical transition on stage. But it never applies easily to this play. The play stays perpetually ahead of you, moves raggedly with the roughest edges pushing forward, then comes screeching to a halt. Scenes catapult ahead, and there are 90-degree twists and cinematic smash cuts exactly as one experiences in a horror movie or a bad dream. And then there is the blood, a word that appears 42 times in the text. It's more like an image river than an image chain, something out of Kubrick's The Shining. Given this glorious canvas filled with black and white and red, it is amazing that the only truly great film of Macbeth is Akira Kurosawa's Throne of Blood, which dispenses with Shakespeare's text entirely. Kurosawa's masterpiece is Shakespeare and Hitchcock combined, supremely poetic without actual textual poetry. Macbeth is a tale of epic proportion, and yet the Macbeths themselves are rather unremarkable. They are indeed a bourgeois couple. The great English visionary Trevor Nunn gave Ian McKellen and Judi Dench the most cunning direction before the opening of his renowned Whisper Macbeth at the other place in Stratford, England. He asked them, "What will the neighbors think?" Let's talk about the witches. They're the real reason we're all here, right? Let's admit it. Everybody loves a good witch. First of all, are they really witches? They only refer to themselves as sisters. If you extract Hecate, who is a cuckoo in the nest, they don't actually make anything happen. If you go to a fortune teller and she tells you you're going to kill your boss, you can hardly blame her for the murder when you actually commit it. Years ago here, Penn and Teller, the magicians, offered to do, our first season actually, offered to do a seance for us. There were, I think, 6 of us. And all they needed was a room that they could make completely black, absolutely black. And we went under the stage at the Weiss in the trap room where there wasn't a single light leak. They told us that everything they were going to do for us was completely false. Then they proceeded to scare the living hell out of us. Are the 3 sisters identical hags with pointy hats? I don't think so. They're distinct individuals. The first sister is older. She's the teacher, she's the mentor. She has that kind of tutorial relationship with the second sister, who's younger and a student or an apprentice. And the third sister is the blind prophet with the third eye. She's the only one who ever actually predicts anything. This is not to attribute genuine prescience to the third sister. She is not Cassandra. Her predictions are, at closer examination, well-reasoned extrapolations, perhaps extensively researched, not unlike the contemporary television mystic. As Scotland's most distinguished warrior, Macbeth is the obvious candidate for kingship. This is, moreover, a pre-primogeniture society. The crown passes to whomever commands sufficient power and reputation among the thanes. The presumed successor is appointed the title Prince of Cumberland, in other words, the heir apparent. The royal transitions were often bloody affairs, with something like 9 out of the 10 kings before Macbeth having died violently. It stands to reason that Macbeth would get the gig. And he has no children, so it's also not so far-fetched that Banquo, the second top warrior, and the one equipped with progeny, would create the line of future kings. In short, this is not fate, it's well-calibrated prediction. Act 1, Scene 1, first sister. When shall we three meet again? In thunder, lightning, or in rain, second sister. When the hurly-burly's done, when the battle's lost and run, third. That will be ere the set of sun. First, where the place? Second, upon the heath. Third, there to meet with Macbeth. There is, of course, the notion that 3 is a number with deep ritual and symbolic resonance across virtually every culture. The evolution of the play and the addition of Hecate may have had to do with giving the audience, and especially the king, what everybody wanted. Everybody wants to blame the witches. It is, as it always has been, more satisfying to assign agency to the supernatural than to confront the implications of human will. And then there is prophecy. Act 1, Scene 3, the 3 sisters on the heath. First, where hast thou been, sister? Second, killing swine. Third, sister, where thou? First, a sailor's wife had chestnuts in her lap, and munched and munched and munched. Give me, quoth I. Aright thee, witch, the rump-fed Runyon cries. Her husband's to Aleppo gone, master the tiger. But in a sieve I'll thither sail, and like a rat without a tail, I'll do, and I'll do. Second, I'll give thee a wind. First, thou art kind. Third, and I another. First, I myself have all the other. And the very ports they blow, all the quarters that they know, in the shipman's card, I'll drain him dry as hay. Sleep shall neither night nor day hang upon his penthouse lid. He shall live, a man forbid. Weary 7 nights, 9 times 9, shall he dwindle, peak, and pine. Though his bark cannot be lost, yet it shall be tempest-tossed. That passage operates as allegory, even parable. Whether Lady Macbeth has literally offended the first sister in some prior encounter, or whether the narrative functions as a figural commentary on her character, her refusal of generosity, her compulsion toward acquisition, is deliberately left unresolved. The ambiguity is structural, not accidental. If there are witches in Macbeth, there are 5 of them, including Macbeth and Lady M. 5 is also a magic number, like the 5 points of the pentagram. Here are the Macbeths conjuring. Act 3, Scene 2. The Macbeths are alone. Be innocent of the knowledge, dearest Chuck, till thou applaud the deed. Come, sealing night, scarf up the tender eye of pitiful day, and with thy bloody and invisible hand, cancel and tear to pieces that great bond which keeps me pale. Light thickens, and the crow makes way to the rooky wood. Good things of day begin to droop and drowse, whiles night's black agents to their praise do rouse. Thou marvelest at my words, but hold thee still. Things bad begun make strong themselves by ill. So prithee go with me. Now go back to Act 1, Scene 5. Lady M is alone on stage, and there's the sound of a bird. The raven himself is hoarse that croaks the fatal entrance of Duncan under my battlements. Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here, and fill me from the crown to the toe, top full of direst cruelty. Make thick my blood, stop up the access and passage to remorse, that no compunctious visitings of nature shake my fell purpose, nor keep peace between the effect and it. Come to my woman's breasts, and take my milk for gall, you murdering ministers, wherever in your sightless substances you wait on nature's mischief. Come, thick night, and pall me in the dunnest smoke of hell, that my keen knife see not the wound it makes, nor peep through the blanket of the dark to cry, hold, hold. The first secret between our Scottish couple is that she conjures and doesn't tell him she's done it. That secret tears them apart, and then it is compounded. Be innocent of the knowledge, dearest Chuck, till thou applaud the deed. She watches him conjure exactly the way she has, but she can't speak up without revealing her lie. And when he conjures, thy marvelest at my words, but hold thee still, she's clearly backing away in horror, but she never tells him the truth. One of the play's central preoccupations is the question of masculine identity. What becomes a man? A phrase Lady Macbeth weaponizes to propel her husband toward the murder of Duncan. What Macbeth does not know is she has sacrificed the possibility of bearing a son in exchange for the crown. She is structurally trapped, committed to a trajectory that she cannot publicly acknowledge. As discussed, Macbeth is by all accounts Scotland's preeminent warrior, and yet he has failed to produce an heir. The domestic humiliation is as politically catastrophic as any battle defeat. Historically, Lady M has been married before and had 2 children by that marriage. I have given suck and know how tender 'tis to love the babe that milks me. She is not the problem. She has proven herself fertile. Once the regicide is accomplished and the crown secured, Macbeth's obsession pivots to the matter of dynastic succession. He orders the murder of Banquo and the attempted murder of Flance, precisely because his own childlessness renders the future untenable to him. He finds refuge in 2 of the sisters' later pronouncements, the apparent impossibility of Birnam Wood relocating to Dunsinane, and the categorical assurance that no one of woman born shall harm it. It is a complacency purchased with deliberate self-deception. And yet he cannot suppress the anguish provoked by the vision of a royal line stretching on beyond Banquo to the crack of doom, a line that reaches, pointed and unmistakable, to the very monarch sitting there watching the play, James I. That brings us to the dramaturgical question of direct address. In a number of Shakespeare's plays, the protagonist establishes an explicit conspiratorial relationship with the audience. One immediately thinks of Richard III, Iago, and Aaron from Titus Andronicus, all of whom construct a seductive quasi-complicit bond with those watching, charming us even as they implicate us in the violence. Not so with Macbeth. He is too busy getting involved with his own visions to look us in the eye. Perhaps his crimes are too monumentally foul. He doesn't just murder a couple of people, he plunges a whole nation into eternal night and perpetuates agonizing loss of life on a mass scale. Comic characters are most at ease when having a chit-chat with the crowd. The porter, who for our benefit, play acts becoming the keeper at the gates of hell at the very moment the blood is free-flowing from Duncan and the two chamberlains. They lie like twisted dolls after their gruesome murders, beginning the ever-multiplying proliferation of death in the story of the play. Is the porter a stand-up comic simply there to give us relief? I think it is much more than that. As we sit in the audience in judgment over the murderous couple, appalled and somewhat self-righteous in our own piety, the porter asks each of us to take an accounting for our own sins. He plucks us one by one out of the hoi polloi, accusing one poor wretch of being an equivocator, one a dishonest tailor, finally ending with the all-encompassing accusation of, "What are you?" We've all got some reason to be sent into the eternal flame and should not be so quick to castigate and condemn the murdering couple. When the question is aimed at us, we become participants in the scene. We become accomplices to the crime. Macbeth does not speak to us. He speaks to his visions, his phantoms, his specters. Rather than befriending the audience in the manner of Richard III, he initiates a slower, more insidious process of incorporation. We gradually become him, absorbing his perspective until we share it completely. The process is cumulative. At first, we cannot even determine what he is seeing. Act 1, Scene 3. Macbeth stands apart from his compatriots, having a much-needed drink of water. This supernatural soliciting cannot be ill, cannot be good. If ill, why have it given me earnest of success, commencing in a truth? I am Thane of Cawdor. If good, why do I yield to that suggestion, whose horrid image doth unfix my hair, and make my seated heart knock at my ribs against the use of nature? Present fears are less than horrible imaginings. My thought, whose murder is yet but fantastical, shakes so my single state of man that function is smothered in surmise, and nothing is but what is not. And Banquo says, look at how our partner's wrapped withal. Macbeth's clearly seeing something, but what? Then his hallucination becomes more manifest, Act 1, Scene 7. Macbeth has left the feast which he hosts for Duncan. If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well. It were done quickly if the assassination could trammel up the consequence and catch with his surcease success, that but this blow might be the be-all and the end-all here, but here upon this bank and shoal of time we jump the life to come. But in these cases we still have judgment here, that we but teach bloody instructions, which being taught return to plague the inventor. This even-handed justice commends the ingredients of our poisoned chalice to our own lips. He's here in double trust. First, as I am his kinsman and his subject, strong both against the deed. Then, as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife myself. Besides, This Duncan had borne his faculties so meek, had been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued, against the deep damnation of his taking off, and pity, like a naked newborn babe striding the blast, or heaven's cherubims horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air, shall blow the horrid deed in every eye, that tears shall drown the wind. I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, which o'erleaps itself and falls on the other. Then the image becomes more temporal, yet only Macbeth sees it. We do not. Act 2, Scene 1, Macbeth is alone. Is this a dagger which I see before me, the handle toward my hand? Come, let me clutch thee. I have thee not, and yet I see thee still. Art thou not fatal vision, sensible to feeling as to sight? Or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation, proceeding from the heat-oppressed brain? I see thee yet, in form as palpable as this which now I draw. Thou marshalest me the way I was going, and such an instrument I was to use. Mine eyes are made the fools of the other senses, or worth all the rest. I see thee still, and on thy blade and dudgeon gouts of blood, which was not so before. There's no such thing. It is the bloody business which informs thus to my eyes. And then, in the next solo, he plans the death of Banquo, already haunted by a bloody past, balancing himself uneasily. He projects his thoughts into an empty future. Act 3, Scene 1. Macbeth is alone on the throne. To be thus is nothing, but to be safely thus. Our fears in Banquo stick deep, and in his royalty of nature reigns that which would be feared. 'Tis much he dares, and to that dauntless temper of his mind he had the wisdom that doth guide his valor to act in safety. There is none but he whose being I do fear. Finally, in the banquet scene, Banquo materializes as a ghost, and crucially, we now see him too. The process of identification is complete. We have entered Macbeth's perceptual field entirely and see the world through his eyes, however deranged the spectacle. We share his vision. In the end, his journey serves up an epiphany about the utter meaninglessness of life, a nihilistic revelation, the black hole situated at the gravitational center of the play. There are screams off stage. Wherefore was that noise? It is the cry of women, my lord, says Seton, Macbeth's servant. Seton exits and later returns. The queen, my lord, is dead. Macbeth, she should have died hereafter. There would have been a time for such a word. Seton exits again. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. Life is but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his time upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And that dark discovery contains it all. Words, time, light, and shadow are possessed by the poor player who delivers the speech as the actor becomes one with the king. He doesn't have to talk to us. He talks to his illusions. By the end, he is lashing out at everything and everyone, Scots, English, even God, and we are all still inside of him as he rails against very existence itself. The architecture of Shakespeare's play is no less astonishing when it comes to Lady Macbeth. She is often misunderstood. Audiences, especially critics, seem to long for some version of Cruella de Vil or Morticia Addams, refusing to accept that she is more of a Jackie Kennedy. Duncan refers to her as honored hostess. She has conjured to unsex herself. Does she succeed? She will attempt to sacrifice her own womb for her husband's career. Cynically, you might refer to her as the perfect spouse, the one that will give up everything for the love of her partner. Her one small fault is that she keeps a secret from him. Macbeth and his wife are so in sync in the beginning of the play that it seems they can communicate almost telepathically. Act 1, Scene 5, the Macbeths alone. Macbeth, my dearest love, Duncan comes here tonight. Lady M, and when goes hence? Macbeth, tomorrow as he purposes. Lady M, oh never shall sun that morrow see. That's a very grave prediction in that eternal darkness is indeed about to descend. It would seem that the Macbeths have a very hot physical relationship in spite of being childless, or perhaps in part because of it. In the beginning, they can't seem to keep their hands off of each other. They talk of murder like some twisted, grotesque, homicidal foreplay. After Duncan's assassination, as the murders start to spread about the country, Macbeth ominously says to her, "We are but young indeed." One horrifyingly thinks of Joe Stalin at the start of the cult of personality and the terror of the gulag. But they are not young. Macbeth is a seasoned general, and Lady Macbeth has been married before and mothered children. While they are not old, middle age is on the horizon, and the time they have is short, which lends urgency to their story, the most valuable ingredient in any drama. Tragedy falls on Scotland itself as a dominating character, but it also strikes out at the couple. They take turns leading each other to that providence. In their first 3 scenes together, it is very clear that upon the exits, she leads him. Perhaps he gets closer to her each time, but she leads him. In the aftermath of Duncan's bloody murder, she faints. This is often staged as if it's an intentional ruse creating a distraction, but is this right? Lady Macbeth believes she is unsexed and has lost her femininity, but she is superstitious and unsophisticated in her self-knowledge. Possibly she has retained her sensitivity and is overwhelmed, finally, by the awful events of the night. That seems much more interesting to me. In the following scenes, Macbeth clearly leads her. It's as if Mary Shelley is desperately chasing her monster across the Arctic ice field. Eventually, Lady Macbeth is all alone, sleepwalking, speaking to an imaginary revenant of her husband, trying to wash away the blood, hallucinating. Yes, she too has visions. In Act 5, Scene 2, she fades away until finally in Act 5, Scene 3, she is so overwhelmed and troubled with thick-coming fancies that she vanishes from consciousness. She eventually makes the ultimate exit in a suicide, throwing herself off the rampart. After being so intensely close to each other, do the Macbeths ever achieve intimacy again once they have committed the murder? I don't think so. They are pulled apart until a timeless abyss separates them. There are more threes in Macbeth. The three murderers are like the three sisters, and like the three sisters, they are individuals. Shakespeare doesn't write fairies and monsters and sprites. He writes people. And even if they only utter a couple of phrases, they are distinct, even unique. The first murderer seems sullen, reluctant, and subdued, while the second is bright and eager to please. Macbeth goes to work, but it's clearly the first one, dark and petulant, that gets Macbeth's attention. In the Truman Capote book, In Cold Blood, it's sweet, introverted Perry Smith, the least likely of the two killers, that proves the most deadly. Macbeth knows his man, and after Banquo is dispatched, says to him, "Thou art the best of the cutthroats." When the third murderer appears and joins the other two before the killing, the first two are at first perplexed and suspicious. Another choice that productions like to make is to introduce a sister here, in my opinion, too cute. Of course, Macbeth would send along a third murderer. He trusts no one. He's Marlon Brando in The Godfather. While Macbeth approaches perfection as a play, it is important not to be submissive and obedient when staging it. Act 4, Scene 3 is extremely long and includes a description of the laying on of hands by Edward the Confessor, the English monarch. It chews up a lot of clock relatively late in the game and makes for a delicious cut. Robert Blacker did a production with director Moises Kaufman, and they intercut the Lady Macduff murder in Act 4, Scene 2 with the very long scene in the English court as flashbacks. I was eager to find my own editorial version of this in my last production, for which I was extremely grateful to them both. Anyway, the juxtaposition that created, added to the barbed, abrupt transitions, which are so much a part of the play and very much in the spirit of Macbeth. Ultimately, the most important consideration regarding the production of Macbeth is how it illuminates the present. As theater artists, we practice our craft in the eternal now. As I've said, rather selfishly, we are more interested in our own lives and times than we are in the 11th or 17th centuries, and that is how it should be. Sadly, Macbeth is a play that seems to universally apply to all times and to all ages. It is about totalitarian dictatorship and its weaponry, terror, dominance, intimidation, violence, murder, even infanticide, and its damage is ongoing. When Malcolm ascends the throne after the demise of this dead butcher and his fiend-like queen, he doesn't rouse the rabble. He isn't received with open arms, but with skepticism and inevitable mistrust that follows the age of a despot. Malcolm takes the throne by making the right noises. He knows that at the end of the day, when darkness falls, hegemony is fed and sustained by the people's compliance and submissive consent. But they can strike back with no notice. And the people are most dangerous when they are quiet. Are they ready for reform? Are they secretly waiting to overthrow him? Are they lying in wait as if for Julius Caesar or Caligula or Maximilian? Malcolm does what politicians love to do. He introduces new policy in the hope that he will be readily accepted as the new leader. He imports the English system of government from Edward the Confessor, with the societal titles of Duke and Earl, and he changes the order of succession to primogeniture, a less bloody way of passing the crown. He holds his breath. Malcolm faces the silent and the doubtful. There is no cheering, there is no applause. There is only the relentless memory of the catastrophe, painfully slow to recede. Who knows what's ahead? Shakespeare doesn't wrap things up neatly. He squirts in plenty of vinegar and lemon juice. The future is always open, always dangerous, always uncertain, just like in real life. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you for,
Spooky.
I know, speaking of, it's a short play, but a long lecture.
We're going to open it up for some questions, but I'm going to kick us off with Des.
Yes.
Why are you obsessed with this play?
You know, that's a really good question. I think it probably had an impact on me when I was a little kid. You know, my dad was killed before I was born, and so I think I've always had a strange relationship with death. The first time I did it, I was very much concerned with the Kennedy assassination. I watched Lee Harvey Oswald assassinated on live television by Jack Ruby. And that's got to have an impact on a little kid. And then I also, of course, watched in amazement how when the assassin is himself assassinated, the assassination of the president is unresolved. And there's just this wave of uncertainty and mystery. And that wave swept the country. And I grew up with that. And finally, of course, we elected King Richard of Nixon, you know, to basically more or less bring an end to that era. But it went on for years. So that was the first time. The second time, I did an interview where I said, you know, my wife and I understand what it's like to have, you know, career, you know, take the place of a baby, and you smother the career and love and attention. And my wife was so angry at me when she read that article. She said, you've never talked about anything personal. You've never talked about us in that way, publicly, let alone in an article. You know, what are you doing? Why would you do that? We were pregnant. And so that was a fantastic solution to that, or I probably would still be dealing with her rage all these years later. And when I went back to Canada, I read an article in the Globe and Mail up there about the fact that, you know, talking about really comparing Canada as, in a sense, with the other African colonies, you know, like South Africa and so on, Tanzania, and, you know, making it clear that Canada was perhaps not as far removed from those colonies as you know, as we would have thought. And, you know, there was always this thing in Canada, which I grew up with, you've got to be conscious, you never want to offend the governor. You don't want to rise too high. The governor's British. You never want to rise too high. And so, you know, we set this play under a regime like Ian Smith and Rhodesia. And the production was very popular, but no one got it. I mean, I didn't read a single insightful word about what we were trying to do. It literally, the ideas literally did not cross the footlights. And so I realized that it's not enough to have, you know, an understanding of a play and a theme. You have to actually put it on the stage so that it's vivid. So I, you know, and I may do it a fourth time if somebody gives me the chance. Yeah, why not? It's, you know, and you see yourself changing as, you know, you do a play. Anyway.
Great. Questions? Anybody? Yes, I see a question right there. Can I hand you this microphone because we're live streaming? Hand that back, would you?
Hi.
Hi.
So do you think that Lady M is motivated more by like love of her husband or want for power, or something different, and like how do you think that changes during the play?
Gosh, that's a big and a very good question. I think she's very much motivated by her love for her husband, and I think I think she's extremely superstitious. So when she unsexes herself, she's doing it as a sacrifice for him, for Macbeth to become king. How does it change? I think he changes. He becomes grotesque and darkly ambitious, and I think she stops recognizing him at a certain point. And the murder and the following murders, the subsequent murders, pull them apart. And I think that's one of the great, I know it sounds ludicrous, but sadnesses of the play, the tragedy, that they start off with this idea and then they just continue to separate until, like that image in 2001 with the astronaut floating off into space, they just disappear into oblivion.
Who else? Okay, great. Lots of questions.
Hi, I had a question about specifically like the reading of lines. So I know that Shakespeare is known for writing in iambic pentameter, but a lot of the lines in this show specifically from The Witches are written in trochee. I wanted to
Right.
ask sort of how the formation of line readings influences your interpretation of the text.
You are a real smarty pants. So that is a really smart question. So I'll try to answer it, briefly, succinctly. You're right. The three sisters, as I like to call them, Lady Macbeth refers to a Rhinthy witch, but they never refer to themselves that way. And I think they're Pictish peoples. I think they're ancient peoples. I think that's what he's kind of getting at. They're occupied people, and he writes them in trochaic tetrameter. So the lines only have 4 beats as opposed to the 5 that we're used to in iambic pentameter, and the beats are reversed. Iambic pentameter is the beat follows the foot, so it's like the heartbeat. Trochaic tetrameter is the opposite, and there's something satanic about that. There's something that's really disturbing. When shall we three meet again? In thunder, lightning, or in rain? And you don't have to do much with, I'm a terrible actor, I want to point out, but you don't have to do much with that to get that sort of unworldly, frightening tone. And so I think it's good to pay a lot of attention to the text. The most important thing about the text, in a nutshell, is its discovery. It's not conversation, per se. It can behave as conversation, but it's all discovery. And just like making discoveries in your own life, you want to be amazed by those discoveries. They're important to you. It's your life. And so in the sisters, too, it's very important that it doesn't turn into just recital. That they're actually, a great word for all acting is experiential. You want to experience the text.
Kennedy, did you have a question?
If you got a 4th try at it, what would you change and what would you keep? And then is there anything that you feel like you've had experiences with since you did the last one that you would change, like a specific, or would have an effect on how you see a specific part of the play?
Sure. I mean, I think the first time I did this, I think I was when I came here, so I was 29. And I really believed I was going to live forever. And, so far so good. But I think I haven't a sort of an understanding of them that I probably didn't when I was young. And that is that you only have a finite amount of time and you need to do what you want to accomplish efficiently. And so I think the louder the clock ticks, the more one tends to feel that way. And I have no idea where I would set it. You know, we were talking yesterday. I was talking to a class yesterday and saying, you know, a lot of it's just contemplative. You know, you spend lots of time thinking and pay attention to all the things that are occurring in your life, and ideas will seep in. You know, you will find that you've got a vision for what you want to do. And these plays are, as you all know, or you wouldn't be here, they're just tremendously inspiring. You know, it's real life. You know, all you have to do is add flesh and blood to these plays, and they come to life. It's the most miraculous thing. And they're nothing, the words on the paper, but you bring a talented actor in touch with them, and something beautiful is born. So I hope I do get to do it again. I've gotten to do it in class a little bit with this year with a number of the third-year graduate students, and I found that incredibly satisfying.
Hi. So you mentioned the Hecate section possibly being added by Thomas Middleton.
Yeah.
Are we to assume the whole second visit to the witches in Act 4 was added to satisfy like a burning desire for masks from the court, or?
You know, listen. I didn't make this up, but I think it's believed that the Hecate scenes seem out of step with the rest of the play, and since Middleton and Shakespeare were collaborators, then it does make sense that in later productions they would have wanted to gussy it up. Just like now, if you do a revival of Death of a Salesman, you got to have a really good reason to do it. So if you can make it a little sexier by abstracting the set. So I assume that was going on, and I've never really liked the scenes, and so probably I use it as an excuse to cut something that I'm actually not fond of. They seem so out of step. The three sisters seem to me so deeply human, you know, as I try to capture today. You know, they're different people. They're different, but they're people. They're not, you know, there's not a lot of hocus pocus, you know, even when they're conjuring. It's so, yeah, so I think the Hecate, and anything that is connected to Hecate, I mean, Shakespeare uses the name Hecate in his text, but that's what I think. And I think I'm probably in a majority here, but I don't really know.
But the speculation is it's that entire scene, including the lineage of kings and the other apparitions, not just the Hecate section?
You're talking about the cauldron scene?
Yeah.
The cauldron scene, I think, is very much Shakespeare. And you know, again, it's hallucinations that he's experiencing. So I think the cauldron scene is certainly Shakespeare. Yes, I would say so. Yeah, with the chain of kings. I think it's that other stuff that where Hecate appears that's not. Yeah, and certainly Middleton probably had an impact on that scene too. So when it says Hecate, get rid of it.
Thank you.
Des, do you want to talk about the curse?
Oh, sure. You know, what's funny about, this just occurred to me doing it. You know, I've done Dr. Faustus, and I did Faust, actually, the opera at the Met, the Gounod's Faust, and I've done Dr. Faustus, The Tragical History of Dr. Faustus by Marlowe. I did twice when I was a very young guy. And, you know, these are the two plays that we're most superstitious about. And the legend with Dr. Faustus is that someone counted 13 devils on stage back in Elizabethan times, and there were only 12 actors playing devils. So this created a real, you know, storm around the play, and it's continued on over the years. And Mackers, people are very superstitious about it. Again, it's rumored that the boy who played Lady Macbeth in the early production died suddenly and unexpectedly while the play was being produced. And that perhaps led to this, reputation that the play has for bad luck. And now I think there are more rational explanations. Theaters often do Macbeth, and perhaps Dr. Faustus, but certainly Macbeth, when they're in trouble because they're box office successes. So, they do box office. So if a theater's in trouble and you do a play and things go wrong, well, understandably, you blame it on the play. It's Macbeth again. But I'll tell you, one thing that I will note, and I'm not, those of you who know me, I'm not by nature superstitious at all, or at all. But when I did Dr. Faustus the first time, we had 3 fires. The first fire burned down it was a theater called the Backdoor Theater on Bleecker Street in Toronto, and I got a message from my stage manager. He woke me up saying the theater's gone. And sure enough, the building had been gutted with some of our stuff, and happily our stuff seemed to be on the good line of the fire, and so I didn't lose guitars and the things we could have lost. And then a couple nights later, we're at a place called Global Village rehearsing, and somebody yells fire, and at first you think, oh my God, they must be kidding. And the front of the theater was completely engulfed in flames because a car had caught fire, and it's on an alleyway or a lane in Toronto. But we weren't in any danger, but it was scary. And then at the closing party, Debbie Lundmark, her name was a choreographer, they had candles out. It was those days when people used to smoke funny cigarettes, and they were there were candles everywhere. And one of the curtains, this is up on Yonge Street, caught fire, and we had to put it out. Happily, we had teachers from our school were with us from the drama department, and they very wisely got water. I think the rest of us were trying to get downstairs to get out of the place. And so, I gotta say, whether it affects just the psychology of the people working on something, and I don't say, by the way, that had anything to do with, Satanism or darkness. It was just a strange coincidence, but it did scare people. It really did scare people. Anything else?
One more question.
Hello.
Hi.
I know it's a common understanding that for modern audiences, Shakespeare's text is not the easiest to comprehend, and
Yeah.
I know that a large part of that responsibility falls to the actors and how they're actually delivering their performance. But I'm curious, as a director and a designer, if that's something that ever comes into your mind when you're making creative choices or taking on a show.
Well, you bet. And its language, this play is 420 years old. And that's a long time, 420 years old. You think of how much, as you will see, some of you have already seen, how much can change over a decade or a couple of decades. So it's true, but it's English. It's English. And again, the real key to communicating the language is not to look at it like it's chit-chat, to not reduce it to dialogue, that it really is thought, and it needs to be invested with meaning through discovery. And when actors do that, it comes to life, and it's glorious. I'm not an actor, and as you've just seen, but I know that even for me, when I invest meaning in the language, I know I'm communicating it. And when you get an entire company of actors sitting around deciphering a text and learning not only what they're saying and what their language means, but clocking all the image chains in the text and looking at the whole landscape of the play, then it does cross the footlights, miraculously, in a fantastic way. I once, shamelessly name drop, I was working with an actor called Kenneth McMillan, who's wonderful. He's the fire chief in the movie Ragtime, one of his great performances, but he was a wonderful stage actress. And he played Falstaff like a New Jersey barfly, and he was just great with the language and just fantastic actor. But we were trying to get this we were trying to get this word scutcheon. And I went to our producer at the Public Theater, and I said, you know, I got to change this word, because it's just laying there like roadkill. Like, I'm sure the audience isn't, you know, they're just not responding to this, and I'm sure there should be something there. And this word scutcheon, which is basically the back of a crest, you know, that thing that you put a coat of arms on, that's what a scutcheon is. And you know what he said? He said, just tell him to hit it. Just hit it really hard. You hit that, tell him to hit that word really hard. No, just hit it. And so then I said, Kenny, you know, try really hitting that as hard as you can, like smack it right out of the park, hit it. And so that night, and Kenny is very, you know, liquidy when he's, so he, scutcheon! And there was this huge laugh. And I don't think anybody really knew what he was saying, but they knew what he meant. They connected with him emotionally. And so don't be intimidated by the language. You know, for actors, this is your best friend. This is your best friend.
That's a wonderful place to leave it. Thank you so much,
you.
Des. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Wagner New Play Festival this weekend. What? Yes, we've got one of the playwrights in the house, she said. Yes, Wagner New Play Festival. Get your tickets if you haven't gotten them already.